Hello, this is Jim Sove doing IV medication through IV piggyback tubing and primary tubing. As you can see, through lab practice, I use my bags quite a lot, so that's why they're not in their bags. But I would, in a real life scenario, I would use fresh, clean supplies. I would make sure that I'm wearing gloves for sanitation reasons, for health of the patient. And I'm going to go ahead and get started by setting up my primary bag for IV medication. Those usually come in bags of 100 cc's, 250 cc's, or 500 cc's. Usually, sometimes 1000 cc's. Not usually, but usually 100, 250, or 500 cc bags. The tubing itself comes in a bag. It doesn't come clamped right there, so you'll have to do that yourself when you spike the bag. Otherwise, all the fluid will come out. So I'm going to go ahead and spike the bag, or I'm sorry, I'm going to go ahead and clamp the tubing. And then I go ahead and take this. Because I've used this a lot before, the safety cap that was on here, I've lost. But in real life scenario, that cap would be on. I would take that cap off, and once I took that cap off, I would not touch this end because that's considered a sterile end, and you don't want to put a sterile thing inside fluid that's then going to go inside a person's body. So once I have that, I would then pull the tab that's on here out. Well, ideally I would hang it from an IV pole, but if I do that right now, all this fluid will leak because there's no safety tab. But in a real life scenario, I would hang it from an IV pole and I would pull the tab. Because it hasn't, like in a real life scenario, it wouldn't leak yet because it hasn't been spiked, but this bag has been spiked, so that's why it's not hanging from anywhere yet. So I'm going to go ahead and spike it. I'm going to hold it close to the object, and I'm going to push and twist at the same time to spike it. Hold on 1 second because I only got 2 hands. I'm going to pause for just a second while I spike this bag. Okay, the bag is now spiked, as you can see. I need to take this reservoir, and I need to fill it about halfway. Once I fill it about halfway, I'm then going to go ahead and prime my tubing. I'm going to prime my tubing by opening up the valve here and letting the IV fluid flow through each port and flipping these things, these valves upside down as the fluid gets there, so there's no air bubbles left. On this one, there are 3 ports, so I'll do that 3 times. And I just want to make note of this. This is a one-way valve. This prevents backflow of fluid, especially in the form of a IV piggyback. Like, let's say, for example, if an IV piggyback ever did get was higher than which it should be, this tubing, the fluid in the IV piggyback will not flow backwards into this bag. But I'm going to go ahead and prime the tubing. First thing I'm going to do is fill this about halfway. That's good. And then once I open a port, open a valve. Like I said, I'm gonna flip these as the fluid passes it each time, so as to not get any air bubbles. I'm gonna pause it one more time and do that, and I'll see you in half a second, and you'll see a primed tubing. And you'll see in this scenario, I'll take this tab off, and you would do this in like a garbage can or something and have like a little bit of fluid come out, just so you could ensure full priming of the tubing and there's no air in there at all. Hold on 1 second, and I'm going to go ahead and prime this tubing. I'm going to pause right now. All right, I just finished priming the tubing. I did that in a garbage can, and I did it so there's only a bare minimum of fluid that passed through it. Now I'm going to go ahead and prime my medication bag through IV piggyback. In this case, what we're using is cefalozin 1 gram that's already inside this piggyback. It's mixed with 0.9 saline. I would do the safety checks as well, like the 3 rights. The 3 checks and 7 rights to make sure the right drugs administered, all that. And as well as doing that, I would check for allergies. And I'm going to go ahead and prime this the same way. First thing I'm going to do is clamp this clamp, so as to when I do prime it, all this fluid won't come out. Then I'm going to fill this about halfway through, and then I'll see you in just a second. I'm going to pause the video because, like I said, I only have 2 hands. I'm going to do that right now. But once again, there would be a safety cap on here. Once I took that safety cap off, I would not touch this site because this is sterile, and you don't want to put something that's not sterile against something that's sterile that's going to go into the human body. But hold on one second. I'm going to pause and I'm going to prime. I'm going to spike this bag. Then I'm going to prime this tubing and fill this reservoir. Then I'm going to show you how I would backflow this. Hold on one second, please. One thing I forgot to mention is you don't want to prime it too much because this is medication. You don't want to have medication drip out of this because that's medication that the patient will then lose, that they don't get, that might mean the difference between a good result and a bad result. Once I have this almost primed, I'm going to take this port and I'm going to attach it to the first port I see here that's past the one-way valve right here. Because this has been out in the open, exposed like this, I would take a piece of alcohol wipe and I would wipe this. I don't have any on me right now because I'm at home, but I would wipe this with an alcohol wipe. Sometimes at the hospital you have these connectors to one-way valves that act as an alcohol wipe, that as soon as you take it off, you could go ahead and connect the Luer lock right away. But we're going to go ahead and pretend that I connect this through a what do you call it, a alcohol wipe. So I take off this cap. Gonna try and do this while filming if I can. And you want to do it in one motion. You don't want to like hit the ends like that or anything because of sterility. Alright, it's now connected, but this isn't primed yet. Normally the IV piggyback is hung higher than this, but we're going to hang this lower to backflow it. This is going to ensure that fluid from here backflows through this tubing all the way up here. So to do that, we need to unlock this valve. I'm looking at here, I see dripping. I think you can too. I could kind of hold this upside down a little. It's hard to see on this phone, but I see dripping here too. It kind of shows that there's backflow. So I'm comfortable in saying that this has been primed. So I'm now gonna go ahead and hang this higher. Then the IV piggyback. To do that, I need this piece. I forgot the exact name of it, but I will use this. The IV piggyback hangs higher than the actual main source of fluid. This is kind of a poor man's version because I don't have an IV pole at home. But if you notice, the IV piggyback is hanging higher than this. Both valves are open. Or I'm sorry, I haven't opened up this valve yet because I haven't actually connected it to a patient. But the IV piggyback valve is open. We're going to go ahead and pretend that I'm connecting this to a patient. To do that, we would take off this blue cap. Once we took out that blue cap, we would do the same thing We would ensure a clean technique by taking like an alcohol swab and rubbing the port that's on the saline leg on the patient, or however the patient has a IV attached to them, and then we would then attach it. Once that's attached, I would then feel comfortable taking this out and unstopping it, unvalving it. That's going to go in a patient. And by doing that, let me see here. My bag fell. Hold on one second. Another reason to use an actual IV pole is because that just fell down and I was able to save the day, but I had to pause the video. As you can see, this is connected to my patient. It's dripping. Just to keep my room clean, I'm going to go ahead and clamp this, but in real life I would keep it open. Next thing I would do is I would check the drip rate. I would use the formula as well as like how many milliliters per hour. For example, this bag is 500 milliliters. So let's say the doctor wanted this over 1 hour. It would be 500 over 1 times the drip rate, which I forgot what the bag was the drip rate, but let's say it's 10. 500 over 1 times 1 minute over 60 times the drip rate of, let's say, 10 over 1, and then you would get that math. I don't have a pen and paper in my hand, but that would be the drip rate. And the reason that's important is once you open this, you could not that one, I'm sorry, but this one, the clamp that's connected to the main IV tubing, you could clamp it however tight or loose you want to get that drip rate. And based on that drip rate is how many drips per minute, or you could quarter that per 15 seconds. And that is how you do IV piggyback medication through primary tubing through gravity. I hope this was sufficient.